Breaking Boundaries, Women in Sports Journalism, Pioneers, Perspectives, and Progress. The tide is starting to turn for women in sports as a new generation of athletes and communication professionals takes equity into its own hands. Award-winning journalist Janie McCauley and Murrow faculty member Wendy Raney will discuss the responsibility to make time to tell stories that transcend sports as they consider why sports culture has changed and where we go next. Moderating this panel is Wendy Raney, a scholarly assistant professor in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, where she teaches writing in communication, Com 300, reporting across platforms, ComJur 333, sports journalism, ComJur 487, and strategic sports writing, ComStrat 475. Prior to entering higher education, her professional experience ranged from being a traditional newspaper reporter to a public information officer in the Montana state government and editor of We Proceeded On, a scholarly journal of Western expansion history. Please welcome Wendy.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. We appreciate you being here. For a long time, this panel was billed as having a couple of other panelists on it, and for various reasons, they had to step aside and could not be here today. So you have me and Janie just sort of having a conversation about storytelling. So we are really fortunate to have Janie here, and I'm so excited. This is like 3 years overdue. Janie was inducted into our Hall of Achievement in 2021, and end of the pandemic, we were still doing things virtually. And that's how we met, which is hard to believe that it's just been 3 years and it's all been basically virtual. But in addition to being in Murrow's Hall of Achievement, Janie was the 2006 AP Sports Writer of the Year. She has covered some of the biggest names in sports, from Tara Vanderveer and Cameron Brink to Steph Curry and Ichiro Suzuki. She's reported on the biggest stages on the planet. Four Summer Olympics and 2 Winter Olympics.
Yeah, this summer will be 4 summer.
Okay, 4. She's going this summer. The World Cup in Brazil. She's been to 2 Super Bowls, 4 World Series.
My memory's getting worse.
Warriors NBA Finals. Like, we're talking, all of the big things. But I think what is really special about Janie are not those big names or those big stages. It's her storytelling and the way that she humanizes every story and every individual, from the brightest shining stars on the sports stage to the people behind the scenes who you otherwise would not know about. And I think that's what's really special about Janie, and we're really honored to have her here today.
Too.
So I'm so honored to have you here.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about pioneers, perspectives, and progress in sports, which I think is really the perfect topic for, illuminating and the power of untold stories, which is the theme of our symposium this year.
So I want Wendy to open this and show it to all of you, because it sort of is something I know she'll like, but also it fits the theme. Stand up, show it to them.
Now I'm going to cry. Oh. So Janie knows that I've been a big Tara Vanderveer fan my whole life.
I didn't know that until recently.
Yeah,
but
she just learned it. But
does anybody in the room know what this poster is? Most all-time wins, men's or women's basketball, for a coach. And this happened a couple months back, and it was a really special day, and I sent Wendy kind of live updates as I could. It was an afternoon game, Brandon, so it was and Sam and you Deadline sports writers, it was an afternoon game, which was nice because the ceremony afterward took a long time. But this is a 70-year-old coach who still is driven to be great and to adapt. And that's one thing that we all have had to do. I a lot of adapting in my 30 years doing this. I've been out of Washington State for 26, and Tara Vanderveer is a perfect example of someone who has adapted her game, her coaching, based on her personnel, based on the times, which she lost 3 athletes in the transfer portal last year, which is rare for Stanford. As you might imagine, a student at Stanford typically will want to stay and get their degree. So there's a starting point
It's a
for
really
Wendy.
good starting point, because where I wanted to start was Title IX in 1972. It was slow to catch on and create change for women's sports. And what Janie doesn't know is part of what I love about Tara Vanderveer. I played basketball in college, a small Division III college in New York. And it wasn't until a couple of years after I graduated that I saw women play basketball on television. And that it is not that long ago, but Tara Vanderveer was the first coach I saw coach a team on television. And I
A
just
New Yorker
became a huge
too.
fan.
And a New Yorker. So
Yeah, so this is a great starting point. We've come a long way, right? From the late 90s, first time women are playing basketball on television, to where we are today,
Monday night.
where 16 million viewers tuned in to see Iowa beat LSU. And I think, I have a whole list. Janie and I talked about what's happened in the last 3 to 5 years with the National Women's Soccer League, with changes in the NBA, the Kansas City Current building the first professional sports stadium dedicated to women. So many, Nebraska volleyball setting the record with 92,000 fans in attendance. It's hard, even if you've been to Bowler and seen our volleyball team, 92,000 people. So it's just tremendous what's happened in the last few years. And, so Janie, I just want to talk to you and hear from you about why now? Why is this happening now?
Well, and I was just going to say one example just from last week was Jenny Kavnar became the first Major League Baseball play-by-play announcer right in Oakland. I was ill last week and I missed opening day, but I got to see her leading up to that. And so there are some other, not only the viewership, but the job opportunities for any of you could do anything in this world of sports. And it might not look exactly like it did for me coming out of WSU 26 years ago, or my mom coming out in 1968. My mom, I just want to thank her for coming, because she was a letter winner on the WSU ski team. So, yeah.
Yeah, the opportunities transcend just opportunities for athletes and the coaches and broadcasters and reporters. Some of the other things I think that have changed are athletes from the 90s, the prominent athletes from the late 90s and early 2000s have sort of taken things into their own hands to create additional opportunities for women now. We have, Together, which is a media corporation and commerce company that was founded by 4 of the world's greatest female athletes, including Alex Morgan and Sue Bird. And I was also looking at some of the other broadcast opportunities for women. And
you have all women's broadcasts going on regularly now and across sports. But also, I want to point to the male professional athletes, the male collegiate athletes who are showing their faces for women's sports.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Curry has 2 daughters, and he is going out to Stanford and Cal women's games and cheering on the women. And he's just one example. So that there are some things that there are all kinds of reasons for the progress, the opportunities for these women through the NILs and ways to use their platforms. Well, and Steph also brought on AZ Fudd from UConn as in his Steph Curry SC30 brand. And so you have that kind of thing happening more regularly, where the superstar in one sport. Oh, well, anybody watch the 3-point contest, Sabrina versus Steph at the All-Star weekend? So there's another example. Steph didn't have to do that. She almost beat him. And so these things are also helping elevate women's sports.
I think what we're seeing is a lot like what Lisa Taylor talked about, are the shift has occurred now. We don't necessarily need to talk about women in sports because the playing field is starting to level. You know, it really is. And we can just talk about being athletes. We don't necessarily have to talk about women athletes and women's broadcasters. We are broadcasters and reporters and athletes in our own right.
I'm curious, just from a show of hands, how many of you have taken advantage of these WSU spring break trips to somewhere? I know some of you, if you're underclassmen, you might not have had that chance yet, but maybe you hope to. Is there a show of hands of how many? Okay, so almost, a good third of the room.
Yeah.
And some of you who hope to, in the next couple of years, go on these trips where you gain experience. I'm thrilled with that progress as well to illuminate some of these stories.
And much of what we do on those trips is storytelling.
Right.
And Janie, that's what you're a master of. And so I would like you to talk about that responsibility, the responsibility to make time to tell those stories.
You kind of just read my mind, because I do have to carve out the time between the game story coverage that's required of me, which is most of the Warriors home games, a good chunk of baseball between the A's and the Giants in the Bay Area keeps me, especially this time of year with all the overlap, pretty much busy until June if the Warriors go the distance. They may not this year, but carving out the time to tell these stories, I do take as a responsibility and something I love to do. I'll go back to I think it was December, where I heard from someone at Cal about these two women from Spain. I also like to try to reach an audience. Is everyone in here a sports fan? My mom's not. Nope, not everybody in here is a sports fan, right? So what is your name? Coral. You're not a sports fan. Okay, but I'm going to try to reach you through the stories I tell. That is my goal, or to get someone to read this who might not have otherwise. Cal has two women from Spain. They played together when they were 10. One's from big city Barcelona, one is from the northern coast in a farming town. They played together at age 10. They ended up playing together again in high school when the small town gal came to Barcelona. The one from Barcelona, her parents moved, they had different jobs, so she didn't stay in one place. They came back together. Then they went their separate ways for college. The one from Marta, from the coast, the small town, farming town, went to Tennessee. The other gal went to University of San Francisco. Okay, they've gone their separate ways again. Well, Marta's mother got sick with breast cancer last year, and she left Tennessee and she went home to their town. And the other gal transferred from University of San Francisco to Cal Berkeley. Marta was thinking of staying home in Spain and not coming back until these new opportunities with the transfer portal, which this is a new ball game from when I played a little bit of college tennis here and then was able to go to Lewis and Clark State for a semester. I was working 30 hours a week at the Lewiston Tribune and able to play tennis down there and come back. I was ahead in my degree and came back and graduated here on time. And Marta decides to take a recruiting trip to Cal, finding out that her friend, Claudia, is in Berkeley. And her mother died last August after this battle with breast cancer. And she's debating whether or not to come across the world and continue playing basketball. But Claudia was there. And now they're reunited for the third time. They started at age 10, played together in high school, and now they're college teammates. It gets better. Marta's family had a world-renowned cow. A world-renowned cow. They supply currently they are the top milk supplier in Spain. Okay, how do you get a world-renowned cow? So now I'm intrigued, right? Not only is there this great friendship and bond, and Marta would not have come back from Spain again if Claudia hadn't been at Cal. And now, well, how do you have the top ranked cow in the world? It was her grandparents on the farm years ago, but they still supply most of the milk for Spain and parts of Europe. And so I did a little video of her explaining how you have a world-renowned cow, and there's a whole list of parameters and guidelines, and her grandparents flew the cow to Canada, and so it ended up being something far different than I went into it thinking, and that was a very well-received story I carved out time to do, and it was really fun. I still want to have fun when I do this. Most days are still fun, and that matters too.
I always tell students to be ready for that story to go in a different direction.
Right.
It's not the story you thought it was going to be.
Right. And usually, often, your first, second, or third question might not lead to your story. Brandon, stand up just for a quick second. Okay. I met this young man at a journalism conference by chance last year in San Francisco. Okay, you can sit. Okay. And I said, it was kind of a thing where I said, well, let me see if I can get you a pass to go to the Warriors with me tonight and get you some experience. And I have a relationships. I have a long-standing relationship with the Warriors over 22 years, where they usually say yes because of our good relationship. They credentialed him on the spot. He came along with me. And we didn't know I was going to have him help me with the quotes, split up and go to one locker room or one press conference, and I'd go to the other. It just so happened we had the best luck that night. And this is not a women's story per se, but this is taking advantage of an opportunity when something shifts on you on the spot. Klay Thompson was giving away a wheelchair to a basketball wheelchair. What we call those, not an electric wheelchair, but a special wheelchair. Klay Thompson was gifting that very night that Brandon happened to go with me. And he had a story to bring back. I texted Wendy. I said, I'm delighted. He's coming back with a story that's beyond what I could even have. And this happened over the course of 3 hours. We made this whole connection. There's a story that fell into your lap, basically, that was really special, right? Klay Thompson, a Coug, proud Coug, is gifting a wheelchair to a young man who plays basketball. And another example of illuminating untold stories. That's just a quick example of another one that was really special.
Well, you go out on assignment, and your assignment is to cover the games, but you're talking to people and you're building those relationships, and you're finding stories, and lots of them. How do you choose which ones to tell?
It's you don't always know right away. The Warriors do a lot of special things and honor a lot of people, and the Giants do the same. It's how do I choose? Sometimes I have a gut instinct that it's something that maybe Coral would love to read. Maybe it's something where by sharing the struggles of this pitcher who went through 2 major elbow surgeries will help. Raise your hand if you've had a surgery, right? It's not so easy. If you can find a story that will impact another person, if I can do that once a month, I'm very happy if I can do that once a month. Even if I can do that once every 3 months, maybe it helps you know that you're not alone going through whatever you're going through if I share what. So I have to try to recognize that the story will have some legs, so to speak, and not just be something for sports fans, but something that will help. And we have a lot of athletes using their platforms right now on social justice and, again, supporting women's sports, but also speaking up that they've needed therapy or mental health coaching or support. Why not tell those stories and show that those things are great? It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for coaching. I've done it myself in the last few years after some really hard stories, investigative stories I would never have been prepared to do at your age, that were abusive rowing coaches. There was a suicide involved. There was a decorated coach let go. A decorated coach and former athlete let go. I needed my own support and coaching and help through telling those stories. So why not find these stories that might inspire, might impact? Okay, we're not saving lives. I have some friends I have a friend, Eve, who I swim with, who she works at Kaiser Geary, San Francisco, ICU cardiac unit. Okay, she's under pressure to save lives. And I think of her here, and then I think of what we do. We are also essential workers in a way where we can make an impact through these stories. Even the young woman who came back from Spain to go play with her friend, the courage it took for her after losing her mother to come back and play. Does that sit with anybody here?
Good.
I find that sports reporting, sports storytelling allows us an opportunity to communicate on stories that transcend sports, social justice issues, politics, other heavy, weightier topics that people might not be open to discussions on until they're presented through the lens of sports. Do you find yourself having opportunities to tell those kinds of stories?
Yeah. I think we all gain, as we gain experience, we gain perspective. I had major elbow surgery in 2022. And I think this is another example. I got injured playing tennis in San Quentin prison, male prison. This opportunity came up to play tennis with the male inmates as an outreach program. So suddenly I'm invited as a tennis player. Suddenly my radar goes up. Well, I want to be in there as a journalist too. I mean, does everybody agree? So then I had to go through all the proper channels. You don't just get to go in as a journalist to prison, a male prison as a woman. These men had not seen women in 3 years. Okay, imagine this after a pandemic. So I kind of get goosebumps because it wasn't a comfortable situation. I got cleared as a journalist to go into San Quentin with my notebook. No recording device, no phone. So you better take damn good notes, right? Yeah. So I wrote a story about, and I decided, I'll be interested to see what you guys think. I decided not to go into everything that everybody did. The subjects in there, the men in there, had I gotten into every reason why they were in there, would we have had way too much? It wouldn't have strayed from the subject of playing tennis and community. Here's another story of an untold, a forgotten population. Does everybody agree? I mean, I don't drive by San Quentin anymore the way I did before. It's out of my beaten path. I don't go that way typically anyway. It's in Marin County, across the bridge I don't take. But when I do, I don't go across the bridge the same way now because I see those faces of the men I know in there. I told a story of playing tennis in there. And I was in there with some of my tennis friends, so they are quoted in the story. Well, Jessica Pagula, a pro tennis player, shared my story on her social media channels, on her Instagram. Well, the tennis channel caught on. And they came and did a documentary with us last year. And after elbow surgery, I didn't have any victories for a long time. I was coming back to try to play tennis again, and I took 25 years off after playing here. Well, that's a victory. There are victories that we can have that aren't about results on the floor, on the court, on the soccer field, on the pickleball court, wherever, on the piano, whatever you do for cards. That was a victory, because telling the story of a forgotten population. Now, they're all in there for a reason, most of them, right? And I keep that in perspective too. That was my greatest victory in the last couple of years. The tennis channel coming and doing a documentary with us after my story. There's another one that I think a non-sports fan might read, or maybe somebody in here, or somebody in Murrow School, or somebody reading that story knows somebody who's incarcerated, or has been touched by drugs, or has been touched by crime, right?
So to tell those stories takes an artful interview. Can you talk to these students about that process and how you conduct those interviews so that you can get those deeper connective stories?
It's tricky, because sometimes we may go into a story with a plan of how we think it might go. And I had no idea going into prison what that story might look like, until the inmates started giving the outsiders, that's us, the outside tennis team, inside tennis team, outside tennis team, started giving nicknames. And my friend Margie's son, Stefan, big, handsome, good tennis player, 6'3", best player in our group, who's in there for the first time in prison, pretty naive kid, they nicknamed him Twinkle Toes. He's got this big serve, and he kind of dances on his toes before he hits it. And so then I'm kind of thinking, and it takes you a little while in prison to get a nickname. I didn't get mine for some months after that, but Stefan got his nickname on day one. And that's how I decided to get into the story. Now, that wasn't an interview per se, but it was observing, gauging, details, right? And sometimes, but then I needed to talk to the inmates about the process of nicknames. We are leaning toward, in the AP style book, just for you guys to know, going toward incarcerated people versus the word inmates, so that we still recognize them as human beings. And if this coverage I've done plays a small part in that, that's another victory for me. But I'm still using the word inmates because it's easier, right, than incarcerated people, but that is on the list of things that we are considering as changes. Now that story could have been told. Any one of you can chime in here on how you might tell that story, but I had never been into prison before, and so going in there and painting a picture of what you see, this little tennis court that if you don't hit the ball at a certain point, you're in a fence because there's only 3 feet of space. So painting a picture of being in there was the first thing. but also figuring out, well, how do you get a nickname in prison? It's sort of a sign of respect. They loved Stefan from the opening moment. And so that's how I decided to start into that story. Rather than, well, Doc, as they call him, is in for... And a few of them I know what they're in for, and some of them I don't. And 3 of them have since been released. And it's been something special these last couple of years.
So you've told a lot of other significant stories and interviewing professional athletes who are sometimes reticent to share personal stories and information. And you've built relationships over many years. And so it would be difficult for any of us to walk in. So understanding that you already have established trust and respect with those athletes. So you've got that groundwork laid. How do you get them to tell their personal medical stories or stories about death or loss or struggles that they're having?
Well, this most recent one with this young man named Dalton Jeffries, a pitcher, I had a favorable timeline because he had his second Tommy John surgery. Tommy John reconstructive elbow surgery is a major surgery in baseball. It's the 50th year anniversary this year. So this is why we were pegging this as a time to do this. Dalton had elbow surgery 3 weeks before I had my elbow surgery. And so sometimes it's a shared experience. Sometimes it's as much as going up and saying, you know, Addison, I understand that you've been away for personal reasons to help your ill father, and I'm just so sorry, and I care so much. Okay? Or, you know, Olivia was up all night with a sick pet, and I'm so sorry, and I hope you're doing okay. It really goes down to careness and fairness, caring and fairness. A lot of it. And at this point, and I take a lot of pride in this, I'll look back one day, Stephen Curry's people call me when they want a story told about his foundation that gives to kids in Oakland, that creates meals and safe play spaces. But rather than just say, Steph Curry is giving $50 million to the city of Oakland, I went to the school last fall and found a young man who'd gone from Eritrea, a 10-year-old, who would sit alone at lunch 2 years ago in he's 10. As a first grader, and I believe I've got the timeline, as a first grader, he would sit alone by himself. His family had gone from Eritrea to Ethiopia to East Oakland. Okay, not an easy path. So I went, and that's the young man. I told the story through the eyes of this 11-year-old who's skipping through campus waiting for his new playground built by Stephen Curry's funds. This family squeezed into a small apartment across the street. He had 3 other siblings, a younger and a couple of older, and the joy on this boy's face. So when I connected with the principal and I said, I'd like to talk to a student who's actually going to be impacted by this playground and this space. And he came, and this was the boy, and it was his first interview, and he just, the joy on his face, that's the way I told the story of Stephen Curry giving $50 million. Stephen Curry and his wife, let's not forget, this is a joint effort. And these athletes, that's how you can tell the story of these athletes using their platform through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy who'd gone across the world. They had to go to Ethiopia before they could get to the U.S.
I think you can sense from hearing Janie talk about her stories that she truly cares. There's a real investment in people. And when I've talked to people across Major League Baseball and with the Warriors and people who have just crossed paths doing their job with Janie, what they talk about is her genuine interest in other people. And I think if you really want to tell stories about people, no matter who they are or what the story is, you have to have a genuine interest. You have to have a genuine curiosity, and you have to really care about the story you're telling. And so it can't be rote or even methodical. It has to sort of grow from your passion inside.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a story I'm working on now that I wanted to go this way. And it's probably not going to go exactly the way I wanted it to. I've been assigned to cover swimming at the Paris Olympics. It's a bit daunting. It's the first major Olympic beat I've had in 6 Olympics. I'm a daily swimmer. It's how I've dealt with chronic back pain. That's another story I want to do in this coming year, something on athletes dealing with chronic pain. So some of these come from my own experiences. I think I'm older now, so I've had some life experience. Well, siblings from Israel, sister swimming at Cal Berkeley and a brother swimming at Stanford. Okay, there's a little bit of a geographical challenge here. Their parents moved from Israel a couple of years ago, pre-current conflict. And there are 2 younger siblings in the home in San Jose. So we've got Cal Berkeley here, we've got Stanford here, and then we've got San Jose here. And these are 2 college kids without cars. I'm guessing many of you don't have a car. I imagined, and I'm not saying it won't happen, but it may not because it's April, and I imagined going to Shabbat dinner with this family on a Friday night in their home in San Jose and telling the story of these 2 siblings trying to qualify for the Olympic swimming for Israel, one at Cal, one at Stanford, brother, sister, through the eyes of a Shabbat dinner at their home. It's probably not logistically going to happen where I go into their home. The parents are a little bit guarded, and understandably so. So I'm going to have to adapt this story. It's still going to be a good story. I promise you that. And I've finally figured out, I think this Saturday, double cross our fingers, that we're going to get them on the same campus for a photographer, and I'll interview the brother. I've gotten photos and watched the brother practice. I've been with the sister, interviewed her, and perhaps the dad is going to drive them, so I might get to interview the father this Saturday. So I am hopeful of this coming together for photos to tell this story of these 2. And they don't, part of the reason they spoke to me is I don't want to just jump in at them and say, what do you think about the conflict in Israel, in the Middle East? And that's not the way I'm going to approach this story, because they have been turning down interviews to others who want to ask them about political stuff. No thanks. But Cal and Stanford trust me to tell the story. They're former ballroom dancers. So I also proposed to them, take me ballroom dancing with you, right? Let's think outside the box for these stories. If Brandon had more time, I would have had him go with this young man, right? If he was working with me down there, I would have had him go with this young man who actually received the wheelchair from Clay Thompson and go spend a day with that guy, or spend a week with that young man who got the wheelchair from Clay Thompson, right? If we think outside the box, maybe we bring in Coral, and Coral wants to read that story. Or somebody else my mom probably would read that story.
So mind you, Janie's responsibility to AP is to cover Warriors games and to cover Major League Baseball games. And she's talking about making time to spend a week watching someone play basketball with their new wheelchair. She's talking about going to dinner at someone's house. She's going to spend her Saturday hopefully getting 5 minutes with an athlete's father. She is making time to tell stories that matter.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to go to Stanford on Saturday. It's a 75-mile round trip. And I had to go to our photo editors and say, this is our one chance to get these two in one place, and I am begging you to realign our coverage of the baseball and hire a freelancer to cover the baseball. Please free me up a photographer. This will pay off. So this is not just, we don't have the resources of umpteen photographers to just me snatch one on to go along with me to Stanford. They had to hire a freelancer. That freelancer said yes to rearranging his or her schedule so that Godo, my colleague who also worked with me on the Spanish friends, they are like sisters. I called them Spanish sisters because they have. So this man, Godo, my colleague, can go with me to Stanford to get a photo of the siblings. So it doesn't just, and we're waiting on her practice time finishing his Stanford banquet, so there's a window in the afternoon, and I am counting on the father driving them there.
So I teach a sports writing class, and yesterday I talked to them about how we had to pivot, right? We had a panel planned, we had meeting, we talked about what we were going to do here, and now we're doing this, which I'm really delighted about. I can't lie. But I had them come up with some questions that they wanted to ask. And one of the students saw that you had the opportunity to interview Roger Federer recently. And, his question was, how do you approach an interview like that?
Okay. I told you I was losing all my tennis matches post meeting Roger and him touching my hand, I'm 8-2. Just as a little side note. But the Warriors, Roger Federer is bringing the Labor Cup to Chase Center. Chase Center is a Warriors facility. And they came to me on a Monday and said, can you be here Friday at 10 to sit down with Roger Federer? I said, okay. I'll drop everything. Yes. I'm a little huffy here. They said, Janie, you 10 to 15 minutes and you stick with the Labor Cup questioning. I said, okay, I will agree to whatever parameters you, Labor Cup, focus on the Labor Cup. Okay. So I had seen Roger in San Jose one previous time where he was doing his tour to raise funds for Africa. And so and I had one question in that press conference years and years ago. I knew that I needed to just sort of let it gauge the situation, right? Because they want you to focus your time on the Labor Cup. And there were only 2 print interviews granted and 2 TV interviews granted. And so I was the last to see Roger in the group after he did everything else. And so I think that worked in my favor. And he sat down, and it was almost as if we were old-time friends. It was just incredible. But I asked him about all of the good things he's doing. Not through tennis, right? Tennis is your avenue for doing wonderful things in the world, for helping Africa. And I said, I was at your event here years ago, but I also wanted to know why he wanted to bring tennis to the Bay Area. But I also considered myself an asset because I'm a Bay Area tennis player again. And so I was sort of an ally for his people too. He didn't know that necessarily yet, but he sat down and I got talking to him, and I asked him some simple things too. How do you overcome a bad day on the court? Not that you've had very many, but some things that were actually going to help me learn about the best player, arguably about one of the best of all time, and maybe get a little bit of knowledge for his thinking. And he took me through he mentioned his number of wins versus his number of losses and how much he'd learned from those. And so I didn't necessarily have an exact game plan because I didn't know how it was going to go. And I didn't know if there was going to be someone standing over me. Now, Janie, you're straying from the Labor Cup questions. But then I was able to just, it was going so nicely. Now, my legs have shaken twice in my life. And I'm just going to stand up for a quick second. I was supposed to meet Michael Jordan years ago. He was going to come to Seattle when I was there, and it didn't happen. And then it ended up happening years later in Oakland, where I finally got my one-on-one with Michael Jordan, and I couldn't stop the taste. Oh, God, I could do. And then once I interviewed Jordan, I went down the other end of the court, called my brother, and said, "Take down the posters at home. I'm okay now. It's done. I've met him." So the second time it happened was just recently. All these years later, 30 years in, I had my legs crossed speaking to Roger, and my knee started bouncing. He saw the goosebumps go up my arm, but we're human too, right? We're unbiased fans, neutral, but we still care. We still love this stuff. I hope you're going into this because you love it and you want to tell stories, and I still do. So then I said, Roger, at the 2003 U.S. Open that I covered, my late father went and saw Rafa on one court, and my little brother went down to see you. And they both came back and said, "I just saw the best player in the world." And Roger laughed and smiled, and he said, "And they were both right." And so we had this just beautiful session that didn't go exactly as planned. And I gauged how Roger reacted. Nobody was standing over me. And we got to talk about tennis. And it was one of the best days of my life. But the next night, my little brother flew down from Wenatchee, Washington to go to the Warriors game. Again, the Warriors, you've seen my relationship with them. My brother's kids wanted to meet Klay Thompson just the way Brandon did. So the Warriors gave them some passes to come watch me work. They give me passes and tickets once a year so my two teenage girls can see their mom out working in the field and know what she's doing. So they gifted me 6 tickets that night for my brother. He doesn't make it down very often with 4 kids. 3 of them came. Roger stayed and was at the Warrior game the very next night. My brother and his kids happened to be down there waiting for Klay Thompson when Roger came out. And my brother, the better tennis player in the family, my mom and my dad were very good. My mom still gets out there once in a while. My brother gets to shake hands with Roger and meet Roger and take a photo with all the kids with Roger. And my brother's kids and my kids may not know what that means right now. They know what it meant to meet Klay Thompson. But that was an interview that I didn't script it. We can script it, or we can just sometimes go with how the conversation's going. Because again, your story isn't going to necessarily come from the first, second, or third question. It was late in the interview that I found out she had the world-renowned cow. I mean, does anybody else think that's fascinating? Who knew that there was a cow contest? I mean, so did you?
My husband's a rancher. Well, I have a whole 2 more pages of questions that students had, but Janie, you're such a good storyteller that we've used up all of our time.
No.
Yes, we have. But fortunately, you all get to hear from Janie again tomorrow. She is our lunch keynote speaker, and she's going to have a significant amount of time to share her experiences and tell her stories, and I hope that you'll all attend. Janie, I want to thank you so much, not only for being here today, but for all that you do for Murrow students, not just giving Brandon an amazing opportunity, but for giving all of these students who've come to Major League Baseball spring training with me and for others whose questions you answer and opportunities that you give them. The Coug is in your heart. I know every day, even when you're not here, and I'm so glad that you're back here.
Thank you. And
Thank
any
you
of
for
you who, few of you know how to reach me, but if
I have Janie's access, information. So anybody who wants to talk to Janie, anybody who wants to talk to Janie.
No, I would love to. I mean, I'm at this place where this is really special to me. In my 20s, I didn't have maybe the capacity to, or even with young kids there for a stretch, the capacity to mentor as much as I do now, and I really want to. So
lots of people say, reach out, give me a call. Here's my number. I think you can probably tell from listening to her talk today that she means it. So thank you, Janie.